This is a screen replacement for the Verizon iPhone 4. First order of business is to make sure that the iPhone 4 is powered off. We can check that by pressing the home button at the bottom of the screen. If it is powered on, just press and hold the power button for about 3 seconds and you'll see a screen come up that says slide to power off. We'll just do that first. Now let's get into it. You'll notice that there's two screws at the bottom. They're the pentalobular screws. What we'll need to do is make sure we get those out of the bottom before we can proceed. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we put those in the appropriate locations on the screw mat. Now what we'll do is take both thumbs and just gently slide up on the battery door and it'll come right up. First thing first, what we'll do is you'll notice that there's a screw at the bottom tightening down the battery, and what we'll want to do is first take that screw out. Then we'll take our green pick and just gently pick up and the battery will come disconnected. Then take the little tab that they provide you to gently pull up and pick that battery straight up. Next we'll go up to the top of the phone and you'll notice there are 6 screws at the top that we'll need to slide off first to get the this little black shield up off of it. This whole time as we take these screws off, we need to make sure that we put them in the appropriate locations on the screw mat. Next, we'll just take and gently pry up on the this little clip, and it'll just pop right up once it's completely loose from the circuit board itself, and it looks similar to that. And then we'll just place that off to the side here. Next, we'll just move down the circuit board, and you'll notice that there's a little shield holding down the charge port at the bottom of the phone. We'll need to remove both of these screws so that we can unplug that charge port. And that should have just came loose, and you can just pick that up and you place that over to the side as well. Then what we'll do is we'll just gently take and pick that little flex up. Make sure that you're being real gentle with that so that you're not ripping or tearing it. And then just move it off to the side just like that. And then we'll continue down, and you'll notice that there's 2 more screws here at the bottom that we'll need to remove, as well as an antenna cover that we'll need to remove the screw out of it as well so that we can unplug that antenna. As you as you uncover the antenna, there's a little cap that the screw is holding down that you'll need to make sure that you put back on when we get to that point to assembling the phone. And it looks like that. And as you take the bottom screw out here that holds down the ringer speaker, you'll need to make sure that you keep that black piece with it, because it actually fastens that ringer speaker into place, and we'll need to definitely keep track of that. Next, we'll go up here to the top of the phone, and you'll notice there's five connections up here that we'll need to unplug first. You've got all these connections going to the vibrator switches and the power flexes, and we'll need to be real gentle with those, but we need to unplug those before we can move on. After you got all 5 of those unplugged, next we'll move on to the camera, unplug it and get it out of the way so that we can proceed to the screws that are underneath it. And once you get that camera out, it just comes right out of place. Next, there's a screw up here at the very top of the phone that we'll need to replace, or we need to get out of the phone. And there's a little, I think it's an antenna cable an antenna that hooks onto to the camera, and we'll need to remove that as well. And it's in gold, so just place that onto the side. Next, you'll notice that as we took the screw out of the top up here, there's another antenna cover that is covering up this antenna underneath this, and we'll need to pull that up as well. But first, what we want to do is there's a little piece of 3M holding a little wire down here that we need to just gently pull up and just move off to the side here. It's not that fragile, but just make sure that you don't rip it. And then that piece just comes up, and it looks similar to that right there. Next, we'll unplug the antenna that is up here at the top, and it's pretty easy. It'll pop just right up as you just apply a little bit of pressure to it. Next, there are 3 special screws throughout the circuit board that we'll need to remove. There's one here, here, and here that we'll need to remove to get the circuit board to release from the mid frame. And this whole time I'm putting the screws in the appropriate location on the screw mat. Next, you'll notice at the bottom of the phone there's another antenna that we didn't unplug quite yet. It's looped through 2 little prongs in the circuit board that we'll have to weave through, but we just need to unplug it first, and once we unplug it, then we can just weave it out of the circuit board itself. Just like that, and then we'll just press and put it down so that it's out of our ways. Next, you'll notice as you do that, the circuit board will gently start lifting up here like so, and what we'll need to do is we'll just need to pick up just a hair and then pull down, and it'll release from its top half of the phone. Next, you'll notice down here in the bottom of the phone there's a vibrator switch that we'll need to remove, and there's a little screw hole here at the top that we can just take, and we'll put a flat pick underneath, and we'll remove that vibrator switch. It's stuck down pretty good, so you might have to put a little bit of pressure to get it out. And it looks just like that. And you'll notice when we put it back in its spot, there's some 3M tape there as well. Next, what we'll do is we'll proceed to moving on to remove the ringer speaker out of the phone, and there's one screw left here at the bottom that we'll need to remove. And then we'll take and just put a little bit of pressure, and it'll just pull right up. Now that we've got all the circuit board and the ringer speaker out of the phone, you'll notice that there's 3 screws on either side of the midframe that we'll need to loosen up in order to get started on removing the screen. And you can just turn about 1.5 times on those, and they'll be loosened enough to proceed on to the next step. Next, you'll notice, just like the iPhone 4 on AT&T, there's 4 screws in the corners of the phone. There is a black felt in the Verizon phone that is covering up one of the screws, and what you'll need to do is just take a little pick and just pull up that black tape. I've done this a couple times, so that black tape is not there right now, but you'll see it when you're replacing the screw, or when you're removing the screw. This whole time, remember to make sure that you put the screws in the appropriate locations on the screw mat, so that when we go to putting it back together, we're not putting screws in different places. Now that all the screws are removed from the iPhone 4 screen, now we can turn the phone back over, and we can take a razor blade and we can just gently pull up on that screen and remove that screen. And if you just take it and put it in the corner of it and just pry up just a hair, you'll hear it start to remove, and you can just put it between the silver and the black on the midframe itself, just like so. And then just remove that. There's some 3M tape on there, so it might be a little bit tough to remove. And that is what it will look like before we start putting the phone back together. And what we'll need to make sure of is, before you put the screen back on, is to remove all the broken glass that's on the phone, so that when you put the screen back on, you're not pressing down and shattering the other screen. Then you would have to get a whole nother screen to replace that. Now what we'll do is we'll take the new digitizer in the midframe, and we'll take those 2 little flexes, and you'll notice those flex cables are the same length, and so that what we can do is take those and place it in the little slot that is in the metal housing here, and we need to gently put those in there. It's very crucial at this point that you don't rush this part, because if you do, you can easily tear one of these flexes, and then that screen would be bad at that point. So just gently put those in there, and then this whole time you're going to have to be watching between the 2 so that you're not pinching the 2 cables. And most of the time you can notice that when you put the screen in and they're at the same thing, you'll notice that they're level at the top. If it's unlevel like that, then what will happen is the cable's been pinched inside there, but notice that they're even, so we've got the cables through far enough so that we can proceed on putting the bottom in as well. And you'll want to also check just to make sure that the home button feels flush, so that you don't have any glass or anything down there as well. Now what we'll do is we'll just turn the phone back over, and we'll take and start putting the screws back in the appropriate locations of the mid frame here. Starting with the four corners, those are the you'll remember those the best because those are typically the last things that you pull out. The best thing to do is to make sure that you just move this black piece just to the right so that you can get in between it and the ear jack hookup.
Tell me what you just did right there. How you dropped the screw.
I just basically dropped the screw there, so I was just making sure that I can realign it up and
You can even talk about sometimes, you know, things are difficult, so you just gotta have patience with yourself.
right. And during this time, as I finally got the screw back in, just be real patient with it. Sometimes they don't line up just right, and you'll get the feel for it as soon as it starts screwing in. Just be real patient with it though, and it'll get back in there. And then we'll just go down and move on to these other corners. They're a lot freer, so you'll be able to get those in a lot faster than the other.
One thing I want you to say right here, just say, by the way, when I dropped my screw, I used the head of my screwdriver because it was magnetized to pick it up.
And you'll notice as when you're putting these in, if you drop the screw, the head of your tip of your screwdriver is magnetic, so you can pick those up real easy in those tight spots.
See, I'll take that audio and I'll put that when he dropped the screw. What he just said just now.
Seems like you're gonna make it really.
Now we'll just continue putting the last screw in the four corners of the iPhone here. Just remember, guys, be patient. Sometimes they don't line up just right, but you'll get it done. Now what we'll do is we'll proceed on by putting the 6 screws in the sides of the wall. We'll just tighten those back down so that the iPhone screen is securely in place. Next, what we'll do is we'll take the ringer speaker and we'll put it in place first, so that we can. Then after that, we'll be able to put the circuit board in. This whole time, there's 4 little clips at the bottom or at the top of the ringer speaker that we need to make sure that we guide into place. And if you just take a pick and just push down just a little bit on the top of each one of them, you'll notice that it'll slide into place, and you'll feel it slide down. Now we'll take where we've put the screws on the screw mat, and we'll put the screws back in their appropriate locations as we're assembling this phone back together. And just a tip to if you notice the battery little thing that we pull to remove the battery, if you just take and put that on the 3M tape that is still the residue at the bottom, it'll get it out of your way so that you're not fighting with it the whole time. Next, what we'll do is we'll take and we'll put the circuit board back into place. And this whole time you'll see these flexes up here at the top. We'll need to try to push those back just a hair so that we're not fighting with them the whole time that we're putting this circuit board in. Oh, before we do that, we got to make sure that we put the vibrator back in. I just noticed that, and what we'll do is there's some 3M tape, and it'll line up. What we'll do is we'll take the screw hole of the vibrator and then the screw hole of the mid frame, and we'll just line those up, and then you'll know that it's in place, and it'll slide just in place as soon as you've got it the two screws lined up here. And then once that's done, we'll be able to put the circuit board in as follows. What you'll want to do as you're putting the circuit board in is make sure that these flexes are down so that you're not tearing them or anything. But there's a little slot here at the top of the mid frame that you'll notice here that you'll need to put the circuit board piece right here in. So we'll need to make sure that we slide that into its appropriate location. And you'll feel it slide in when you're in the right place, like so. And then we'll take the special screws that we put in the appropriate locations on the screw mat, and we'll start putting those back into the circuit board so that we can hold that down.
Maybe you want to make sure that the antenna cable on the bottom is not underneath the circuit board too.
Yeah. And as you push down on the circuit board, just make sure that the antenna that's hooked to the ringer speaker is not underneath the circuit board, because you'll need to place that in its on the antenna cap on the circuit board so that we can pull service. And once you tighten that first screw down, it'll hold that circuit board down so that you're not fighting with it the whole time. And you'll notice with the special screws, there's one longer than the other, and that long one, if you put it in the appropriate location on the screw mat, it goes up at the top right hand corner of the circuit board. But the other two are a little bit shorter, so. Next, what we'll do is we'll take and we'll fasten the antenna cable, and what we'll have to do is we'll have to loop that through the notches in the circuit board that they've weaved it through. And then once you get it weaved through there, it'll sit down. Just make sure when you're putting some force behind the antenna that you're not putting too much force back there, so that you're not ruining the antenna, but you'll feel it when it slides into place. And I use a little pick just to guide it to the top of the circuit board to where it plugs into that antenna. And be real gentle with it, guys, because it's real easy to put too much behind it and you'll ruin the circuit board with that antenna there. So just be real patient with it, and it'll go in there. Just don't put too much force behind it. Next, what we'll do is we'll take the black clip that we took out earlier to holding the ringer speaker down, and we'll put it back into place here. And there's only one way that it can go back in, so you'll notice that it looks like this and at a triangle type state, and we'll just put it back into place itself. Once it's securely fastened, then we'll move on to putting the screws in along the circuit board here at the bottom, so that we can put the charge port plug-in back in. Now next, what we'll do is we'll take that charge port flex and just bend it back down, and we'll plug it back in to the circuit board here. remember, just you'll feel it plug in when you have it in the right location. Next, what we'll do is we'll move up here to the top of the circuit board, and we'll just take these flexes and we'll start plugging them in as well to their appropriate locations. And most of them will line up with where they're supposed to be. So as you're placing the flexes in the connectors, they'll line up just right. Next, what we'll do is we'll take and we'll plug in the LCD and the Digi into the connectors on the circuit board as well. Next, we'll take and put the screw in the top left-hand corner of the iPhone board, and it's got that metal frame as well that we need to put down before we screw it down. And it looks just like this right here, and it only goes in one way, so we need to make sure that we put it in the correct way. And once you have it in right, it'll just slide right into place. And then just securely fasten the screw down, and everything will be okay. Next, what we'll do is we'll take the antenna cable that is in the top half of the phone, and we'll just make sure that we plug it back in as well. As you're plugging it in, it's just like the other one. Just be real gentle with it so that you're not putting too much force behind it.
Because you don't want to mar,
Yeah.
the cylinder of it.
And the reason that you don't want to put too much force behind it is because you don't want to mar the surface of the antenna so that it's not pulling service. And once it feels right, you'll know when it feels right because it's even flush with the circuit board itself. Then next, what we'll do is we'll take the antenna cover and place it back over that antenna, just like so, and it'll look just like that. It's all black right there. Next, what we'll do is we'll go back down here to the bottom of the circuit board, and we'll cover that antenna up as well with its antenna cover, and it looks like that. And this whole time, this is why it's so important for you guys to put the screws on the screw mat in their appropriate locations. Next, we'll take and put the cap that we pulled off earlier over the charge port. We'll just put that cap back on there as well. And there's only one way that it can go in there, so once you get it lined up right, then we'll put the screws back in their appropriate locations. Be real patient with it because it'll slide around just for a minute, but once you get that first screw tightened down, the second one's real easy.
You could say something like, to avoid, the things, sliding around, you can take one finger
And hold it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you'll do when you're putting this cap back on, just make sure if you want to avoid from it sliding around, just place your thumb over that, and then you can keep it from sliding up and down to where it just covers up that screw hole. Next, what we'll do is we'll take and we'll put the camera back in its little slot here, and what we can do is you'll just take that camera and just put the top in first so that that little cable is being pressed up pushed up towards the top of the phone, and you can just do that. It's real easy, and you'll feel it slide into place as well. and once it locks into place, the cable will slide just right into its appropriate location. Next, what we'll do is we'll take the cap that we pulled off earlier, or the little shield that we pulled off earlier, and we'll just put it in place. You'll notice that the flex cable up here at the top of the phone is covering up the where it plugs in, or where it slides into underneath the circuit board. If you want to take just a pick and just pull down just the hair on it so that it has room to guide, so that you have room to guide it into place, that would be best. And you'll notice that as you put it into place here, just put it down, and then you'll notice that the flex is just out of place, and then it'll slide just straight up into place, and then you can take and push that flex back up towards the top of the circuit board.
So that shield goes between the flex and the board.
Right. And you'll notice that when you're taking it apart, that shield does go between the flex and the circuit board itself. Now that we've got all the screws back in their appropriate locations, what we need to make sure is that we take that little felt that we've pulled up earlier and just place it back over the ear jack cover, and just, if it doesn't stick down, you can take some 3M tape and just place underneath it, and it'll go right back into place. Next, what we'll do is we'll take the battery cover that we've pulled up earlier, and we'll just unstick it from that 3M tape that we did earlier, so that we can put the battery back into place. And what you'll notice as you can put the battery in first, and you'll notice up at the top where that flex is that it's down just a little bit here up at the top, and what we'll need to make sure is that we push that back up, so that when we're putting the battery in, it's not smushing that flex down. And you can do that by just taking the top of the battery first and putting it in place, and then gently just plugging the battery back in, and just make sure that you feel it in, and you'll feel it when it's in place just right. And be gentle with that as well, because you don't want to make sure that you don't ruin it. And then just take and put the screw back in over the battery itself.
Over the battery connector?
Over the battery connector itself. Next, just take the battery door and just put it on, like so. Take your thumbs and slide down. And then put the two pentalobular screws back into the iPhone 4.
Say that again right now.
And then just take and put the two pentalobular screws back into the iPhone 4.
You're just gonna have to
Edit
cut
this.
that out of there. John's taking forever.
And then
Just say,
just
you know,
put the audio over right here, fading it in. That's all.
And then
Tech note.
power it on.
power it on. And that is the iPhone 4 screen replacement on the Verizon 4.